Hi, my name is Rachel Saunders. Welcome to the Lavender and Steel podcast. I have the great pleasure of introducing today Marcia LePlante. She is a Canadian hockey keeper. She's played international hockey and she is an all-round hockey superstar. She's currently in Switzerland for the next couple of months playing for a team over there. And today we're going to be discussing about hockey, women's sport, and just international sport in general.
Thanks for having me.
How would you like to introduce yourself?
So my name is Marcia LePlante, goalkeeper for the Canadian national team in field hockey. Yeah, I've been kind of a weird background in field hockey. I started off as an ice hockey goalie and then turned field hockey goalie at the age of 19. And I've been pretty obsessed with the sport ever since. So
you're a woman after my own heart. I mean, I played hockey since I was about the same age as you. I think I took it up when I was 18. So it's like, it's always lovely seeing another goalkeeper. Everyone says we're a bit mad.
Yeah.
For those who are uninitiated, being a goalkeeper in hockey is one of those positions where you're padded up, but you still have to be able to take a ball to the chest, ball to the head, and just generally put yourself out there. How do you find being a keeper then, especially at the level you play at?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a lot of fun. Obviously, I wouldn't do it if it wasn't a lot of fun. It's definitely a unique position because it's almost an individual sport within a team sport. Because even though you're part of a team, your role is pretty isolated, I guess. Yeah, it takes a special person to want to get hit with a field hockey ball. It's painful at times, but also, there's really cool experiences in it. You get to kind of slide around the turf, you get to make big saves, and it's a lot of pressure. But to me, that's kind of the fun part as well, is experiencing that pressure and doing it anyways. So yeah.
Yeah. How do you find doing it at the international level? Because obviously I've only played at a fairly low level, club level. And every time I look at international goalkeepers, it's like, it's a whole different breed. The sort of level you're playing at is just something else. How do you find it?
Yeah, I think it's when you get to the international level, there's just a little bit less room for mistakes or, to not be doing the things you have to do. If you catch yourself slipping for a week or a month in terms of workout training, we see it a lot more at the international level than you would at the club level. I think you can get away a little bit more with things like that at the club level, but it's quite cool. I mean, to be a role model, especially to people within my community, because I come from a really small town in a small province in Canada. That to me is the really cool part about being an international athlete. It's not so much the actual experience of me playing, but it's what that brings to kind of my small town and how kids view their own potential and what they can do. I think in a lot of ways it decreases the limitations that they see on themselves. So to me, that's the coolest part about being an international athlete.
Yeah. So how long have you been playing at the international level then?
I started when I was 23, I think. I want to say 2021 was my first training camp. So yeah, I would have been about 23 years old when I started. Now I'm turning 29 this next week.
Epic. So obviously you've traveled around the world quite a lot. So what's been your favourite place to play over the last couple of years?
Oh, that's a great question. We went to South Africa last January, and that was really cool because it was a longer tour. So we had a chance to actually experience the place we were playing in. Oftentimes we go into country, we play our hockey, and then we go home. We don't get the chance to see kind of what's going on within that country. And so it was really cool to be able to meet people from there, get to spend a little bit more time having fun experiences, being tourists in a lot of ways. And so that was really cool. Played 3 seasons, I think, in England, and that was also quite fun. Was a really big fan of just the people, and it's very inclusive, in my opinion, at least where I played. People go out of their way to make sure you feel welcome. Scotland was like that as well. We'll see how Switzerland goes, but so far so good. I've only been here for 3 days, but the people have been very nice. So yeah, and Spain was fun as well. I love the Spanish style of hockey, so that was quite cool. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pick just one, to be honest, because every one of them is a different experience. You go to a different country. It's hard to pick one because they've all been really cool in their own ways.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I've only ever played hockey over here in England, and I know that you've had touch points with the US college system as well, haven't you, recently? How did you find the American college system?
For me, there was really positives and there was really negative experiences within that system. I think it's great how many resources they have, how they're able to support their athletes. I do think that there's a certain intensity to it that can at times become a little bit toxic in terms of it kind of becomes your whole identity when you're a university athlete in the US. And therefore, a lot of your mental health is linked to like performance. And yeah, it can be hard to kind of expand outside of the sport world in my experience. But that being said, the hockey itself was a lot of fun to play. My coaches were great. It was awesome to be able to get an education while playing hockey. So all of those things are really great. It's just, to me, it was really hard for me to separate kind of Marcia outside of hockey and Marcia in hockey. But I also played two sports. So I think that made it even harder because I never really had an off season.
Yeah, I can imagine it must get tough. We always see it on the outside. It's so funny because outside of the US, everyone has of America colleges is through the sports lens of often, and like people I don't think people appreciate what that means to be an athlete. You see, obviously, you've got the Netflix shows about American football and basketball, but with hockey, especially field hockey, you've got this very small group of universities who play field hockey over in the States, and they tend to be the universities who are quite high in the Ivy League and that sort of threshold. So again, that must put another layer of pressure because you've got that structural pressure as well.
Yeah. And I think like there's a lot of really great lessons I've learned through playing in the United States, like a lot of like time management and like obviously almost being forced into using the resources you have, right? Because it's it can be hard to ask for help if you need help. And so you kind of learn really quickly that if you don't ask for help when you need help, things can kind of snowball into a bigger issue. And so I think that was some of the things I learned is like using the resources you have, how to manage your time, making sure you prioritize time for yourself too. Like you can't always be playing field hockey or doing schoolwork. Like you have to have free time as well. And sometimes you have to schedule that in to make sure that you're prioritizing that.
Yeah. So what do you do outside of hockey now then? Are you doing anything, or is this hockey? Are you just a professional hockey player full time at the moment?
No, we don't get paid. Like we get a little bit of support from the Canadian government, but we don't get paid enough to just play hockey. So I work two jobs. I have a full-time job it's a charity called Kids Sport. So I lead Kids Sport within my province. It's a grant program to help provide financial assistance to low-income youth, cover the cost, equipment, and sport registration. And then I also do workforce development for the tourism industry in my province. And outside of that, I'm also coach mentor for Coach New Brunswick. So trying to kind of help the next generation of field hockey coaches succeed. And so those are kind of like more professional side of things. From a personal side, I've got a hobby farm. I bought 28 acres a couple of years ago and with the goal of making it into a farm. And so me and my wife moved back to New Brunswick about 3 years ago. Built our house, and now we've got like chickens and geese and ducks and things like that. So that part of things is really fun for me as well. I've wanted to have a farm since I was about 7 years old, so it's kind of cool to actually make it happen now. I don't know. I like to travel. I coach a lot, so my life is a lot of hockey, but kind of within that, that's more like outside of playing. I started a club this year in my community. It's the first club in kind of our region, only the second club in our province. So we're trying to grow the sport. I'm also the president of Field Hockey New Brunswick. And so I'm helping to kind of grow the sport generally in our province and kind of help run the high performance or performance development programs that we have, like our provincial team. And yeah, I do the crazy amount of coaching. So there's a lot going on. But
it sounds amazing. Do you ever think that someone from New Brunswick will get to the Olympics then and be part of the Olympic team? Is that on the card?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully. Obviously, qualifiers are coming up this July, I think is when we start our Olympic qualifiers for 2028. And then hopefully there's also like 2032 in the books as well. I don't see why not. Like, there's no reason a New Brunswicker can't do it. For example, we have a speed skater in New Brunswick who won, I think, 3 Olympic medals at these past Winter Games. And so I think a lot of people saw her do that and thought, being from New Brunswick doesn't mean you can't do things. It just means the fact it's a little bit harder, right? Because we don't have the resources or the size of the sport system that other provinces have.
If I remember correctly, you've been to the Olympics yourself, haven't you?
No, I've been to the World Cup. So I've played in the World Cup Commonwealth Games, NM Cup, Olympic qualifiers, Nations Cup, but no Olympics yet. So hopefully in the future.
It's interesting because I follow Marcia on Facebook, and she posts some really cool hockey stories on Facebook, and it's just like, I think social media has done wonders for women's sport in general. And it's actually, obviously in America, you've got to talk of the WNBA at the moment, but more broadly, women's sport in England, I play women's hockey and I take part in umpiring and match officiating, and I find women's hockey more fun and inclusive and open as a sport. It's so lovely to take part in. And I don't know how you find it when you do your travels and taking part in the team, but I find women's hockey more inclusive than a lot of other sports.
Yeah, I would agree. And even within our club, we have people who come from all sorts of backgrounds, We've got, straight people, gay people, bi people, trans people. We've got people from different countries. We've got newcomers. We've got people of varying religions and whatnot. And everyone is welcome. And it's never even, a question whether or not they're going to be a part of our club. And I think that's been generally my experience in hockey as well. Yeah, I've never not felt included. People always go out of their way to make sure that you're enjoying yourself. So yeah, I don't know. To me, it's been good. I think probably high performance sport could probably use an increase in diversity, but a lot of that comes with kind of economic empowerment sport, right? Not everyone can afford to make it all the way up to the national team. And I think obviously that's an issue that we have to find solutions to. It's more complex than just throwing money at the issue. It's how do we decrease the barriers to sport participation generally? Hopefully, if we keep working at it, it'll become more and more.
I wrote an article a couple of years ago about women's sport in general and talking about the issues that women's sport faces, and it goes back to that observation about American college system. Like in the US, you've got that focus all around the college system, and as soon as you finish college, unless you're doing things like American football or basketball or even men's ice hockey, there's hardly any funding in places like the US for other sort of sports. And in the UK, field hockey is very much a amateur sport. And even at the highest level of field hockey in the UK, very few of them getting paid salaries that you would consider a professional athlete. Mm. And it's funny because living in Nottingham, we've got Nottingham Hockey Centre, which is one of the biggest hockey centres in the UK. And you can go down on a Saturday afternoon and watch Premier League hockey for free, grab a drink, grab a snack, and you are watching the top tier hockey in the UK for free. Across the river in Nottingham, you've got the City Ground where you're seeing Premier League football and you'd be paying 60, 70 pounds for 90 minutes. And it is just mind blowing when you consider just how little money there is for other sports. And I find it really interesting how you've just got this really weird dynamic about where we want to focus funding and resources.
Yeah, and they've actually recently changed their rules within the Premier League in both Scotland and England, where now athletes coming from other countries, if they want to be supported at all with accommodations or flights or anything like that, they need to be on a professional sports person visa, which obviously has its own costs associated to it. So clubs now have to pay these athletes to be there, like a significant amount as well. And you have to be within a certain amount of ranking internationally to be eligible for these. And so it's excluding also a lot of players that are very good, but may not be their teams may not be ranked within that range. But I think the goal of it is to professionalize it a little bit more. So we'll see how that kind of turns out.
Yeah. How do you feel about the professionalization of women's sports as well? Is it going to lose something in that professionalization?
I don't know, to be honest. It's hard to say. In a lot of ways, I think it would be great for women's sports to be professionalized and for us to be paid, but it has to be done in the right way, right? And so, yeah, for this visa rule change, I'm not sure, you know what I mean? It almost feels more exclusive than inclusive, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you look at something like Dutch hockey or Belgian hockey, and how they've tried to be as inclusive as possible with the Schengen zone. And so for people who are unfamiliar with how the EU works, you've got to, once you enter the EU, you've got the ability to work anywhere inside the European Union or the European Economic Area. And in 2016, Britain left the European Union. And one of the consequences has been that Britain's got a massive issue with backlash against immigration and people generally trying to come into the UK. And it is really, as Marcia was saying about skills and jobs, the UK government has been tightening visa restrictions for students as well and other groups. And it has led to this really toxic conversation around immigration. And I find it quite frustrating because we're losing out on a lot of skills and a lot of talent. And people like Marcia being in the UK, it just feels like we're losing something. And I don't know how you see it as somebody outside the UK looking in.
Yeah, well, for me, I actually was supposed to play in the UK this year, but wasn't eligible for the visa, which is partly why I'm in Switzerland right now, which is obviously also a great experience. So I feel fine in that sense, but it is a bit of a shame to be not able to kind of pursue those opportunities. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that opens the door for local goalkeepers, for example. So in that way, maybe that's a good opportunity for people within the UK to be getting these opportunities. So it's hard for me to say exactly. I'm not knowledgeable enough of the reasons behind this. I just am on the flip side where obviously it's negatively impacted me, but I don't know what the end goal is of it. So I don't know that I can speak too much on it and what its impact is. And it's hard to say. This is only its first year in place, right? So we'll kind of see how it rolls out.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting seeing on Facebook where you've got clubs saying we need keepers. and I've seen at least 4 or 5 clubs going, we need female keepers. Goalkeepers are not exactly the most common commodity, and it just feels like a lot of clubs are now struggling on the women's side of the sport, are now struggling. We've seen in Nottingham over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen several clubs closing, and it's currently summer league as we're recording this, and teams are not able to put teams out because of not having enough players. And it's just really interesting how England hockey, they're very focused on the elite level, the Olympic level, and trying to bring people up through the pyramid. But actually at the grassroots level, the lower level clubs where people just do it for fun or doing it because they love the sport, they don't seem to be getting as much support and as much recognition as you would see like the top end elite level club. And I think that is slightly tragic, because with all sport, it doesn't just have to be about the elite stuff. So you talked before about coaching and development. How do you perceive that?
Yeah, well, I think there's value in all levels of sports, right? Like the main value of sport, I would say, is not high performance. It's the communities it builds. It's the healthy habits. For a lot of people, it's a mental health coping opportunity. I think it creates stronger communities and towns. And I think if people aren't playing sports, they're going to be finding other things to do that maybe aren't as beneficial, I guess. But yeah, to me, and I mean, the grassroots and that lower level is where it all starts, right? That's where most people are playing sports. To only be focusing on a small percentage of the population of sports people is not, I think, great. Obviously, there's different requirements and different resources needed at different levels. Higher performance will require more travel, probably more resources like gym programs, nutrition programs, things like that to keep up with the loading of those athletes. But I think that obviously prioritizing just generally sport participation is really important. And so like in Canada, we see it. There's like 2 different like approaches to sport. There's sport participation and grassroots, and then there's high performance, and they're 2 different streams, but both very important streams. And so like I work in the sport participation world, but obviously I play my sport and coach in the high performance world. And so it's interesting to see like how the resources are divided, what types of resources are given to each. Because the reality is eventually some of your grassroots athletes will become your high performance athletes. And if you can create a wider base of people playing sports, that actually benefits both streams, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is how do you then build the bridge between the two, especially when it comes to funding? Yeah. Because this is where women's sports historically has really struggled. We've obviously faced that issue where if you want to play, and you see this with the masters level hockey. So for listeners, the hockey at the elite level got various age groups up until you get to the senior level, and then once you hit 35 you can by all means still play for the senior squads, but then you start getting age categories 35, 40, 45, 50, etc. And those age groups are still struggling to get funding to compete at the international level, and you often see GoFundMe's, crowdfunding and other effort to pull funding in for that elite level sport. And I find that really interesting, that it's still a passion project for the players. There isn't centralized funding for those sort of activities.
It is interesting because obviously they're still representing their country. It's a different, obviously, category of performance sport. And a lot of times, like I view that as like, it's the opportunity for a lot of those people would have never played like international hockey, but it's their opportunity then to get that experience, right? Which I think is really valuable. And I think it's cool because these are the grandparents of people who are, raising kids that are going to love the sport as much as they do. And I find masters hockey to be so fun to watch because those people just genuinely love the sport and they're playing it because they have fun and they just want to be there and they're passionate about it. It's always really fun for me to watch because I think to be able to be playing sports and travel sports up to the age of some of these masters players are like in their 70s, 80s, that requires a pretty big dedication, right?
Yeah, exactly. I've tried out for masters squads in the past, and I've played lower level masters hockey, and it can get brutal. Like they take no prisoners.
Yeah. No, it's not like any good. I think a lot of times people take away from masters hockey and say, well, it's not as high of a level, but to me, it's like, it's not even that. It's just a different category of high level, right? I can only imagine what the recovery needs are and like making sure that you're staying healthy and not getting injured and all of that stuff like that. Those requirements are so much bigger at that level, but we're probably less resourced at that level.
Yeah. So at the international level, how do you find being a keeper staring down some of the best players in the world? Because I can imagine that it must get both interesting, exciting, but also quite intimidating.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember my first international tournament was Pan American Cup, and like Maria Granado was there. LNCP, all these like people that I had looked up to were now playing against me. It was like a really cool opportunity. And I played in the World Cup that kind of next summer. And I remember we played Argentina. I got the start against them. I think we lost like 7-1. And Maria Granado, I think, scored like 2 or 3 goals. And I remember afterwards, like I was like really fresh into international hockey, and just being like, okay, well, that was kind of cool. Like, obviously, you don't want to let in 7 goals in a game, but it was only my 3rd cap, I think, ever. And so to me, the opportunity to even play against these people, I was like, okay, like this was kind of like my tester into international hockey, and I loved it. Like it was just, and then I made saves against her too, right? And that, yeah, to me, it was just kind of cool to experience that. And then as you grow, obviously, then you have to start viewing yourself as like you're not, you're at that same level, right? So now that I'm 5 or 6 years into my international career, I'll say I view things a little bit differently. But my first year was a lot of taking it all in, appreciating the experience, and then figure out how I was going to grow from there. And so, yeah, it can be intimidating at times. Like, the level of athletes you're playing against, but it's also remembering that you're also that level of athlete. And therefore, like, they're playing against an international level athlete too. But it took probably at least like a year of international play for me to realize that I'm at that level. And yeah, that it's like, it's not necessarily like 2 different levels, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. How do you find them playing against those sort of players? What sort of mindset do you have to get into? Because obviously you play at an elite club level and you possibly play against international players at a club level. But what's the step up between the club level and the international level?
I think a lot of times it's the tactics and the strategies that's the difference, right? Like a lot of the international level athletes are just so smart. And so I kind of view it as more of a challenge than something that's intimidating. Like you do your homework more at the international level, you do more like video analysis, you are, trying to figure out what corner plays other teams are going to use and how you can defend them and if there's anything you need to change. To me, it's like a puzzle piece that you have to kind of put together. And I find that really fun. Like that's my favorite part about international hockey is there's more of that kind of analysis and solution, like creating solutions to what you see versus at club level. A lot of times you'll do some video, but you'll mostly just roll up and play a team and you'll do like a general assessment, but you won't actually deep dive into a lot of the videos to see exactly, what strategies you want to use in the future and things like that.
So what's been your favorite matches then at the international level?
Oh, that's a good question. My first cap was really special. We played the US. I think we beat them 2-0, 1-0, something like that. And that was really cool because I wasn't sure that I'd ever play at the international level. Like being from a small town in a small province, it was really hard for me to get onto the national team. I was told that I'd never played domestically and therefore wasn't eligible to be invited to a camp. And so I had to go play for another province at nationals to then be invited to a camp. But by the time I did that, I was too old for the juniors. And so it took a lot of like persistence and resilience to get onto the team. And it was probably like a 3 or 4 year like process of nagging and sending emails and asking to be invited to a camp and saying literally like, just invite me to a camp. And if I'm not good enough, then like, I'll stop emailing you. And so when I finally got the opportunity to play for Canada, I remember that feeling really special and like all of the hard work and it all paid off. And again, like my community back home was rooting for me and that always motivated me to keep working hard, right? When you come from a small town, you're then not only responsible for yourself as a person, but you represent everyone in the small town too.
Yeah, that must be a really interesting feeling, especially when you step onto that pitch and hear the national anthem. And like the Canadian national anthem is one of those really special anthems because it's just it's not just patriotic, but it speaks to being Canadian. And yeah. How did that feel the first time hearing the national anthem when you're on the pitch?
Yeah, that was like, yeah, I had like goosebumps. To be honest, it was hard even just to sing because it was like, I was feeling quite emotional. Yeah. And I think just all the value and that field hockey has brought to my life, like all the people that supported me, I think all of that kind of came to my mind and my family and how, it's not easy for me to be playing on the national team for them because I'm away a lot. It's taken a lot, like support from them as well is, pretty great. Like just grateful for the opportunities, grateful that I even got a chance to be on that pitch.
Does your wife come with you very often then to overseas or is she mainly based over in Canada?
She's mainly based over in Canada. She did come when I played in the Nations Cup in Spain. That's the only tournament she's been to. But she's coming over in Switzerland as well to live with me here. So that'll be fun. But it gets expensive to travel. And I'm already paying, like we pay for our tours as well. So it adds up to be a lot if you're paying for an athlete to go and their partner. Because, yeah, tours are probably they probably range about $5,000 a tour right now. And so you then add in also a flight and hotels and everything for your partner, and that it's just a lot of money that we don't necessarily have at the moment because we've got like our mortgage and student loans and all of that stuff.
Yeah, that must get really tough. How do you work with your wife to work through that? Because obviously a lot of professional athletes go through those sort of same struggles, and I don't think people outside of sport really get to see the inside of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough too because I'm not located where our training camps are. So it's not only when I'm gone for tournaments, it's also when I'm going to training. But trying to juggle it all, it is tough. Like I have to say, it is tough. And it's tougher on her than it is for me, right? Because at least really busy when I'm away. Whereas for her, she's just at home, doing her regular daily life just without me. And we've also got a lot of animals to take care of and things like that. We're trying to figure out more ways that she can come along. And so playing for clubs in Europe, for example, is a really good way that she can come along for the opportunities too. And then we can also travel and have some really good quality time together, exploring a bit of Europe as well. So it's having things to look forward to, right? Like if I'm away for 2 weeks, 3 weeks for a tour, can we plan things when I'm back so that we have things to look forward to? Yeah, I think that's the big one.
So do you feel like there's good queer representation in hockey then? Because for me, at the local club level, there's a lot of queer women who do play hockey around Nottingham. And I always really love it. It's just very normalised. There's not really the big deal made out of it. It's just something which is just there in the background.
Yeah, I would say so, yes, on the women's side. I'm not too sure on the men's side, to be honest. But internationally and locally, I've felt like it's inclusive and there's a lot of representation. And I know there is some representation on the men's side, but I'm not sure. It probably varies country per country in terms of what's, the perspectives in those countries. Yeah, but on the women's side, I'd say
I know it's a bit of a meme at this point with the American and Canadian ice hockey teams. It's almost like a dating service whenever you see the American and Canadian ice hockey teams play each other. It's like how many wives play against each other. It's just, I know at the Olympics I think the Canadian captain and the American captain or something like that ended up married, and it was just like this big
meme. A few years ago. Yeah, Caroline went and Julie too.
Yeah, I just found it really funny because it's like you've got obviously on TV shows maybe you've got heated rivalry, but actually it's women's hockey where it's hella queer. And it's not so much heated rivalry, it's just more like heated, we'll just have a bit of a dust up on the ice and then go for beers afterwards sort of approach. I find it really funny.
Well, it's interesting now with the league too, like with the PW itself, there's so many more interactions between all of these players, right? A lot of them will play on the same teams together. Like there's more of a mismatch, or not mismatch, like a mix up of players from each country on each team, right? So it's not like it used to be just like Canada, USA, and because there wasn't really much of a league, but now everyone's kind of mixed together in this league. So I'm sure there's a lot more interaction going on.
Yeah. North American sport tends to be a bit more cross-border, whereas in Europe, obviously you've got the European Hockey League, but it tends to be more national when it comes to matches. Within, say, England, you've got, even here, you've got regional sport until you get to the top level. It all tends to be quite regional, which is unusual for elite level sport because most elite level sport, once you get past the lower levels, tends to be more nationalized. And I think hockey as a sport has got that regional identity a lot more embedded in it as opposed to maybe a national identity.
Yeah. And I mean, like, so in Canada, for example, we don't have a national league. We're too big of a country right now. But hopefully we can work towards something in the future where we have more of a national kind of professionalized league. But obviously that takes a lot of money to do. Like we'd have to be paying for flights to games and things like that. So it is a bit different. But I mean, who knows, like in the future, what could happen. But yeah, right now we're kind of like Vancouver has a league, like Toronto has a league, Calgary has a league. It's all very divided by city.
So how do you think then funding, because obviously things like sponsorship, central funding, Olympic level funding, it's like what could we do to improve women's sport in general? Because if you try and commercialize it, you end up with a situation like in America with the WNBA, where you've got this women's sport is exploding, but then you've got politics and potentially queer erasure that's slowly creeping into the sport. Whereas other sports like field hockey and women's ice hockey, they're not so much on the map in terms of the corporatization of it, but that also means that you're shutting out people who can't necessarily afford to compete at that high level.
Yeah, I think with ice hockey, it's been kind of a slow growth, right? And I mean, I think they've been doing a really great job. like advertising. And even in the lead up to the start of the league, like they were doing incredible things in terms of their marketing. And obviously they've got huge sponsors as well. But I think it's making sure that the sponsors align with the values of the league and all of that stuff. Yeah, it's hard to say exactly in what ways you should be getting your funding. Most of funding, like for athletes in Canada, comes through the Canadian government, but for very specific things. So get carding as national team athletes, that's like a very specific pocket of funding. The Canadian Sport for All initiatives, very specific pocket of funding for sport participation. I think where there is a gap, and this is both men and women's sports, is that kind of gap between your, provincial team athlete. You could have potential to be on the national team, but you're not yet on the national team. And so there's this gap between being kind of the top athlete in your province and being a national team athlete where you don't get funding until you then are carded as a national team athlete. So like your senior development squad and things like that. Those athletes don't get the same kind of funding as we do, but they're also doing the same amount of training. If anything, they're working harder because they're not at that level yet and they know they need to work harder to get there. That's where, I'm trying to figure it out as a PS, like a provincial sport organization leader of like, how do we support our athletes that are in that weird limbo between being, at the level for funding but also like trying to get to that level.
Yeah. And in the UK, we've got national lottery funding for Olympic sports, but yet England hockey being a classic example of this, that only supports the top tier, like the 0.1%. And I find it interesting that most of the sport is pay to play. So you're having to pay to play the sport you love, but that doesn't necessarily cover things like if you get injured and you have to take time off. If you're a woman and you get pregnant, you lose potentially access to the sport you play, the insurance, all the other things that precariousness that comes from being a sports player. And yet it doesn't, like, you look at men's sport and men don't have to worry about being pregnant. Men don't have to worry about a lot of the issues that women have to go through. And even like the Women's Premier League in football over here in England, you're seeing a dwindling in funding. Like there's not enough support to be able to support the number of teams at the top level, that professional level, unless you've got an owner who's put their hand in their pocket. Women's sport is still seen as something which is secondary to men's sport. And I find that really disappointing because women's sport, if you go and watch it, especially women's hockey hockey at the top level is exceptional. Like genuinely, listeners, if you want to go and watch a really good sport potentially for free, go down to your local hockey club because you will see stuff on a Saturday at an elite level that is exceptionally high level sport.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Like I played in the Premier League and it's just, I mean, the athletes are great, the athleticism, the technical, tactical piece of it. Like, and also I think there's really good interaction with, well, what I like about the UK system is you've got like tiers to your club, right? So like just because you're on your first team doesn't mean you're not interacting with people on the second, third, or fourth team, right? And I think there's that opportunity for mentorship and like working your way up and down. Like that's what I kind of liked about being a part of a club in the UK was like the ability to interact with so many different types of people on different levels. And that was quite cool to me. Whereas like we're building it in Canada, like Vancouver has that kind of system, but not every other province. There's also not the social piece of hockey where like we don't have clubhouses, for example. So people play their games and then they go home, or they go to practice and then they go home. And then of it, like in terms of that gap, like in the UK, not that I'm saying you guys are luckier than we are, but like we don't have the ability to play hockey like on let's say just on your regular evening. So if you're on the national team, you can't necessarily just have a regular day job and then get your training done in the evening because we don't have that system. So a lot of us can't even have regular jobs because our schedule is so sporadic. We have to be in Vancouver and we're training, full days, or when we go on tour or whatever. Like it's hard to find employers that are super flexible with that kind of stuff versus like if you could just be playing in a league at a high level, like that would give us a lot more ability to kind of live and have, normal, I guess, life, if you want to call it, in terms of like having a career. And most of us put all of that stuff on pause when we want to pursue the national team because there's the ability to juggle both.
It's telling, like in the UK, you've got Lee Valley, which was built off the back of the London 2012 Olympics. You've got Nottingham Hockey Centre, which has got 6 pitches. And then in the US, you've got the college system, which you've got places like the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill campus, where if you ever get a chance to go onto it, is literally the academic side is like one side of it. And then the other side of the campus is literally 20 sports facilities. It's huge. And wandering around it, it's like the sports city. It's not just a village. It's literally every sport you can name has got its own facility. And then you go to other places where you might have one Astro pitch, one set of changing rooms, and then you've got a school attached to it. Like in the UK, a lot of clubs play on school pitches. And as you said, there's no clubhouses or there's no centralized facilities unless the club's been going for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of going, what is sport for? Who is sport for? And what do you want to do with it? And as you said, it's like if you want to put your career on hold or you want to go and pursue it in a country like Canada, that must be taxing because you've got to fly everywhere or get the train everywhere or do very long drives.
Train. Like there's not much of a train system in Canada, so everything's flights. And I mean, for me to go to Vancouver for training camp and back is about $1,000 round, so it gets to be quite expensive for one. And so it's that kind of catch where you have to be working enough to be able to afford it, but because you're, in this environment, you're not necessarily working jobs allow you to afford it. And I'm really lucky because my employer is super supportive and I work in sports, so they get it, right? But not everyone has kind of that privilege of having employers that are going to understand if you need to go to another country to play or you need a week off for a tournament, things like that. And then within Canada as well, there's a lack of facilities, right? So the closest after like field hockey turf to me is about a 14-hour drive away. So I don't have access to a field hockey pitch at home. I play on the 4G multi-sport turf.
Wow, 14 hours. That sounds crazy. I'm like, literally, I'm half an hour away from the pitch I normally play on. And there's so for listeners, that within the space of Nottingham, if you were to draw a 5-mile radius circle around Nottingham City Centre, you've got about 15 clubs. Just to put it in perspective. And it's like, it gets crazy. Like, we are really fortunate here in the East Midlands by the number of pitches we have up here and the level of support we have. And it's crazy to think just how you're having to carve out a niche for yourself or a sport that obviously you've got the Canadians are ice hockey mad and ice hockey crazy. I've seen the pictures of you in your junior ice hockey kit, and it's like, that's one sport I think it's like a step above field hockey in some respects. It just, you put blades in the mix and it's like, yeah.
But yeah, so like, I don't know. For me, I'd say like, the music just got really loud. For me, I'd say, yeah, there's a lot of just having to figure out how to make it work. And in a way, it creates really creative athletes. I've got a turf in my basement. Like I put in turf in my basement so that I could make sure that I was getting in enough training. And like, so you find your solutions, right? But it's, in a lot of ways, it shouldn't be so hard to create a good training environment for yourself if you're a national team athlete. It just, we struggle with a lot of facilities and resources in Canada. Although I will say the Canadian government did announce a huge investment in sports. Like, they're going to put a lot of money into the sports system. So I am curious to see where that money goes. I know a lot of it will go towards sport participation, which is great. Like, some of it will also go towards high performance, but I'm really hoping for, facility access, because I think that's one of our biggest barriers to sport participation in at least our province, is there just aren't enough facilities for all the sports, and trying to compete for turf time with, 10 different sports can be quite hard, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if you've ever been to Iceland or Norway and seen the inflatable pitches they have. So in the winter, they've got these heated indoor pitches that they use. Mm-hmm. And I could imagine Canada having something similar if the funding was available. It's like, put those in your local communities and being able to do turf sports in the winter. And I imagine it gets like minus 40.
Not anymore because of global warming. When I was a kid, it used to sometimes get to minus 40. Now we're probably hanging around minus 20, 25 at coldest.
Only minus 25. Wow. I mean, the coldest it's ever been here is like minus 5.
But yeah, it gets quite cold. So it's a lot of also, finding solutions in the winter. Indoor hockey is something we're trying to build. But again, facilities, a lot of gyms won't let you play with like sticks. They won't allow stick sports because they're worried about scratching the floor. Part of me is I'm trying to figure out if I can somehow build like a field hockey barn on my property, where it's just a giant barn with like the indoor tiles on them. But it's obviously, that's a lot of money. So I don't know if I'll be able to do that. But if I could do that, that would make a huge difference in kind of my field hockey community.
Wow, that is amazing. That's like the dream. It's like if I ever won the lottery, I always thought about building a pitch. But yeah, having a hockey barn sounds amazing. Yeah. But that could get quite fun. One of the cool things about field hockey as well is we've obviously got the indoor season, and it's always been a part of field hockey, because traditionally hockey was played on grass. So you ended up with, you had over the winter, the sport would freeze, and then they will take it indoors to sports halls, etc. And there's a really competitive indoor sports league over here in the UK. And so it's like, yeah, you've got that tradition. So playing it in a barn, I could imagine that could get quite fun.
That'd be cool, I think. But yeah, so we're trying to figure out maybe how we find some resources so that we can make these sorts of things happen, and like trying to figure out like if there isn't, you know, solutions coming from the governments and the municipalities, how can we make it happen ourselves, right?
Yeah. And it's like, how do you find it in Switzerland? And have you had a chance to see the pitches you're going to be playing on?
So interestingly enough, in Geneva, there's only one field hockey pitch shared between two clubs. So it seems that they also struggle with the issues of like access to turf time and whatnot. And I guess like a big limitation here is there's just not enough space. Like a lot of the open spaces are being used to build apartments because there's growth in population. They're not allowed to touch the agricultural land because obviously they want to make sure they prioritize those spaces as well. And so, yeah, it seems like there's maybe some creative problem solving to be done here as well. So I think a lot of it is pretty global issues. For us, it's not a space issue. Like we've got loads of space in New Brunswick. Like there's so much space. It's just a money thing for us. So it's more so finding the funds to do it.
Yeah, I think this is women's sport in general. It's like you've got all those questions, and then more broadly sport outside of football, soccer. Outside of that, what do we want from sport, and who do we want sport for? And this is part of the reason why I wanted to get Marcia on the show. Is I've followed Marcia for a long time on social media, and I don't know if we've actually met in person. We might have done at some point in the past.
I think maybe when I was in Nottingham.
Yeah, I think, but it's like you've always been a really good ambassador for hockey, but also women's sport in general. You've always put yourself out there and been very proud to play the sport. You've been somebody who wears your hockey on your sleeve in a way that it's like I see that with a lot of women footballers and sports players in general. You see this pride in playing. It's not just about I'm a sports player. It's like actually I play hockey, or I play football, I play rugby. It's a core part of who you are, irrespective of what comes from that. And I find that really interesting. How do you find that then as part of your identity?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think it's brought so much value in my life. So if I can help other people also find that value as well. I've been called like a club person, you know, like I'm a real club person because I love just being involved in the sports club and getting to know people and sharing my passion with like the kids, for example, in clubs. I volunteer my time a lot to coach and to mentor people. Yeah, like to me, most of the coaching I do is not paid. Like I volunteer most of my time to coach, and it is just because like I've felt the impact of not being able to afford sports, and so I never want to put that onto someone else. If that makes sense. Like I think everyone should have access to like proper coaching, regardless of their financial situation. So. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I am proud to be a field hockey player. Like, I'm proud to be playing at the level that I'm playing. But kind of beyond that is like, how do I encourage others to do the same so that they have similar positive experiences as I've had?
So, describe to listeners what it's like to put the pads on. What is it like to be a hockey keeper?
I just think it's so much fun. Like, and I mean, there's so many different aspects of it. Like, from the equipment, like, I love getting creative with the colors that I wear. I pretty much rotate through colors every couple of years. I'm lucky enough to be sponsored so I can afford the gear, which is like a whole privilege in itself. But I think you could show your personality in the equipment you wear and the helmets you have. Like that's fun to me. And then just being able to make such an impact on the team. Like a goalkeeper can make or break a team, right? You can steal points from other teams. You can frustrate other teams. Like to me, that's just a lot of fun. And then also just being a part of a team as well is I think one of the best things ever, like to have a community of people who, you know, are already on your side, who you can be friends with, or if you're not friends with, you're at least, you know, working towards the same goals. And like, yeah, you're not going to get along with everyone on your team always. Like that's just part of life. But I think when you've always got like a shared experience and a shared goal, that's pretty powerful.
As a keeper, I find I get into that flow state where you've got to be like a field marshal with your defense for like 65 minutes of it, and then for 5 minutes or even just 1 minute you've got that explosiveness where you've just got to be on it. And what's that like at the top level then? How do you find yourself? Do you have to practice that where you're having to switch in?
Yeah, well, I think obviously it depends on who you're playing against and how much action you get. It's actually, I find it harder when you don't get a lot of action than when you do get a lot of action. So lots of shots in the game is sometimes actually easier than fewer shots. But that being said, like I think it's quite cool. To me, like playing goalie and the communication and all that stuff is kind of like a puzzle that you're trying to solve, trying to figure out how to guide your teammates into the right positions to set them up for success. And I find that quite cool. And that's how you stay engaged in the moments when you're not actually making saves. And it's cool because you contribute still, like your contributions are huge when you're communicating, right? If anything, bigger than the saves you're making, because if you can actually stop those dangerous opportunities from happening in the first place, then you've done your job right. And so I've always said like the best keepers actually are probably the keepers that get less shots because they've set the play up to be that way, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. I agree completely. And it's interesting. It's like the piece of advice I got given pretty much early on was be gobby, be loud, but also be pertinent. Don't just be chatty for the sake of it.
Yeah. And like finding the right tones for for your team, like getting to know your teammates and how to speak to each one of them is different, right? And getting to know their habits so you can like preemptively tell people like, things like, if their habits are to step up too early, then you're kind of holding them back before they've done something. It's interesting because it does require like a lot of getting to know your teammates and what they need, because it's not just about you and what you want, it's about what they need from you as well, right?
Yeah, and it must be interesting. I've played for quite a few clubs, and again, not at the level you've played at, but it must be interesting stepping into new clubs on a regular basis, having to get to know new people, especially when you've got players who've been there 5, 10, 15 years who know each other inside out, and you as a keeper stepping in, going, actually, how do I get to know these people? How do I communicate with them? That must be a really interesting challenge.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because like every country communicates in different ways and like uses different terms. And even the Swiss team is French, right? So, and I speak French, which is fine, but I've never actually played on a French team before. On my teams, I've always been like the only francophone. And so I've never had to worry about like, how do you say, how do you tell people what you need in French? And then the terms, like Swiss people speak French very differently than Canadians. And so it's trying to figure out what terms work for them and are my words like weird to them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, I find that fascinating because obviously, I've got my own terms for like how I like to navigate my defenders. So yeah, trying to communicate bilingually or trilingually, that must get, especially when you're trying to work out a concept as well. Do you have to do a lot of work with that behind the scenes? And is that something you're having to train with?
I think it's just a lot of conversations, behind the scenes. Like even on Tuesday was my first day here after practice. I did ask them, I was like, what language do you prefer to be communicated with? Like, what terms do you use? Like, how do I tell you there's someone off your left or someone off your right? Because like we'll use in Canada, like right shoulder, left shoulder to let you know that someone's behind you on your left. But that doesn't really translate to French. Like you wouldn't really say like épaule droite, épaule gauche. And so, yeah, like there's just conversations, right? And they don't have to be super serious conversations when you sit down and have a meeting. It can just be like chatting with your teammates here and there to see what's good for them.
Yeah, that must get fun as well, especially when you're playing at the international level where people are watching you on video and you're like communicating in a language that they don't necessarily speak. So you're having to force them to get a translation service. That must get quite interesting.
It's interesting. And then like making agreements of like, okay, we're all going to communicate in French or we're all going to communicate in English, or it's easier to do it all at once, right? Like if you have to switch between languages during the game, it's a bit tough.
Yeah, I suppose with French as well, you've got German and Romansh. So you're going to have, and Italian as well. So you potentially have got 4 languages.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. But it's kind of fun at the same time. Like it's cool to be in that environment. And even coaching the little kids is so cool here. They're all like trilingual.
Yeah, I can imagine. So that then asks the question, what do you want next then? What's next for you after Switzerland, after potentially going to the Olympics? Where do you see yourself going forward? Would you like to be an international coach? Is that something you see yourself in the future?
I don't know that I'd ever want to be like an international head coach. Like to me, I've seen our coaches and how much they have to put in. And sometimes I think it's almost like an unhealthy amount of time that you have to put into a national team. I would love to coach like junior national team level, I think. I love working with like teenagers and like young adults. To me, like the up and coming people, that's where I find it really fun. Even like I coach my provincial team, like I want to do that probably for the rest of my life, to be honest. Like it's so fun to watch these kids grow. And they're at a point in their lives where they're learning a lot about themselves. And it's cool to be a part of that. Like, not to say that I wouldn't want to coach at a higher level. Like maybe I would one day, but I like contributing to the pathways. To me, that's really, really fun.
Awesome. So to close out then, is there anything that you would like to say to people who are interested in playing hockey or who are currently playing hockey but want to step up?
Yeah, I'd say like just give it a chance, right? Like you never know what you're gonna love. You know, some people try hockey and it's not for them, and some people try it and they'll be like me where they just become absolutely obsessed with it. But I'd say, yeah, don't make it your whole identity. Like I think that your performance actually improves if you have balance in your life. Yeah, just like don't be afraid to ask for resources, ask questions of your coaches, what do I need to do better? How do you see me improving, and what are the ways that you can help me get there? And a lot of it might be like you got to do the work yourself and figure out, what you can do individually. But I think, yeah, if you're trying to get to a higher level, it's going to be a lot of self-reflection in terms of what you need to improve on, being open to feedback and just staying like motivated, and also give yourself some breaks at the same time. Like I think it's easy for people who want to get to a high level to get burnt out because they feel they need to go. But if there's anything I've learned in my like decade of playing competitive hockey is that like time off is important too.
Absolutely. So in terms of pluggables, are there any social medias and activities and events you'd like to plug?
Well, people are more than welcome to follow me. I'm always open to answering questions, and like I often get young keepers messaging me asking, for tips and stuff like that. So you're more than welcome to follow me. It's just Marcia LePlante 34 on Instagram. I also have a Facebook page as well that I answer, messages from. If you feel like seeing what I'm doing with the club, it's Capital Field Hockey Club in New Brunswick. Yeah, I don't know. Like I'm always open to showing you guys what I'm doing. I'm pretty proud of the work I do. So and the kids I coach. So.
Well, all the links are in the description below. And yeah, Marcia, if you ever get to check her out in a match, she's a fantastic keeper, like genuinely one of the best keepers in the world. And it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was fun.
Likewise.